Ah, yes. At this point, Game Freak has become so predictable. It would have been a joke had this not been a big gaming company selling millions of games. And well, what am I talking about? Well, unsurprisingly, trainer customization, a popular feature as proven by the many avatars on various websites such as YouTube and DeviantArt with customized Pokemon trainers, and of course, let's not forget Twitter and other websites with custom outfits for the game, has been completely removed from Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. Now, of course, I know what you're thinking, and this is what I was thinking a while before I read this article. Now, long story short, this is the exact same design methodology used for games such as Madden, where they add a feature one year, then remove it either the next or a few years later, only to re-add it as a brand new and improved feature when anybody who actually played the old one can tell that they're just trying to rip you off so you pay for the same game yet again. Keep in mind though, Pokemon's not a sports game, it's a role-playing game. A role-playing game in, well, a series that has been rehashed to death. Now, of course, you might be wondering, well, even though the series has stuff such as, well, long story short, triple battles and other stuff that you only see once in a game and then they're never used again, even though that happens, let's be honest here. You would expect them to actually keep features from game to game, but apparently Game Freak has been doing this for a long time. Ever since Generation 1, I mean, remember Walking Pokemon, which were a new feature in Pokemon, let's just say Yellow, with Pikachu? It was removed in Gold and Silver, but then they were re-added for Heart Gold and Soul Silver, and then they were removed for the game afterwards, Black and White. Or how Generation 5's season system was not in Pokemon X and Y. Or how Pokemon in, like, let's just say Diamond and Pearl, which could only be found at night, could only be found all day because that was watered down from Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. And of course, Generation 2 as well. Or of course, how Generation 3 did not have the date and time system, despite, actually having a battery in the cartridge that had a clock too. It made no sense whatsoever, other than, maybe they were either lazy or they were removing it so they could re-add it to the next generation to sell more games. And of course, lastly, I might as well mention the whole Battle Frontier thing, which has been consistently added to third versions time and time again. I mean, let's be honest here, the Battle Frontier probably proves my theory right. But hey, let's hear what Game Freak has to say about this whole thing and what their official PR response is. So guys, get ready for it because you're about to be blown away. So, according to Game Freak, removing features and then re-adding them is basically a sign that every region should have its own identity. Okay, so removing features people liked from the last game only to put them back in as a selling point is obviously having to do with every region having its own identity. Bullshit. Bullshit right there. I mean, has Game Freak played any other game from any other developer? I mean, I'm not even joking. This is not how you make a game feel different. I mean, for example, even Call of Duty, the series that's the most rehashed series of all time, even that looks visually distinctive between games, except maybe with the latest Infinity War games. But I mean, look at the Cold War era Treyarch Call of Duty Black Ops 1, and then look at Black Ops 2, which takes place in the future, especially with the multiplayer modes. I mean, the multiplayer maps all have a very different visual look to them, with brighter, more colorful. You could tell by the color palette that game uses. And Pokemon has literally been the McDonald's of video gaming. The same stuff each and every time. I mean, let's be honest here, you can look at the new Pokemon games, and what are you going to see? The same exact visual style for the region that looks absolutely horrendous, even compared to the games in the 90s. terrible Pokemon designs, of which only a handful are good because they got salvaged by fan artists who can actually draw the designs better than Game Freak can at this point in time. And of course, let's not forget how linear and casualized Pokemon has become ever since Generation 5 came out in 2010, with warning shots being fired by certain things in Generation 4. I mean, Generation 4 was still much better than 5 was. It was still a good game, but even in Generation 4, you could see the warning signs on that Pokemon was going to become casualized, dumbed down, and watered down. Because let's be honest here, you can take a look at any other RPG series, and they know how to make games feel distinct a lot better than Game Freak does. There's no excuse. It's just pure bullcrap. But hey, I wouldn't be over just yet if I didn't mention one more thing. Now, I'm going to post a link to this video in the description. But get this, Pokemon X and Y will not get patched to support the new Mega Evolutions. So if you want to get the new Mega Evolutions in your Pokemon games, too bad. You gotta go out to your local GameStop and buy the new Pokemon games, because they're not going to patch it to support the new Pokemon. Even though it's going to be compatible with X and Y, you're not going to be able to get your new Pokemon. And considering how much hype the new Mega Evolutions got, it's pretty clear that people aren't playing Pokemon for the gameplay, but are playing it for the Pokemon. So if you want to get gameplay, go buy the old Pokemon games, or do what everybody else is doing these days in 2014. I'm not going to say what it is, but all the cool kids know. And of course, if you want to play X and Y's gameplay, boom, go play X and Y. Sure, it's linear and casualized, but it's X and Y. If you want new Pokemon and Generation 3 possibly casualized with features removed from X and Y, please get your $40 ready and go buy Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. Heck, maybe even buy both of those. And maybe buy a few more just so you can have 19 copies or 20 copies or 30 copies of that game. Go ahead and buy it. But all in all, if anybody else did this, they'd be on the same level as Capcom, as EA, as Microsoft. I mean, let's be honest, does anybody remember when Microsoft said you couldn't upgrade your Windows Mobile 6 phones? We all know how that went. And let's not forget every Android device ever where they leave you high and dry with updates, or worse, give you an old, outdated version of Android. I mean, I've been to my local Walgreens, they still have phones running Android 2.3. And yet hackers have been able to take many of them and put 4.0, 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, 4.4, and newer versions, whatever newer version comes out, on their Android phone. Really, there's no excuse. This isn't 2005. This isn't like where Generation 3 had the Deoxys forms. This is 2014. They can easily patch it. And you know what? They're choosing not to, so that they can sell you the new games. And I'll give you a link to this interview in the description.
So we don't really plan to put out any kind of patch or anything to update X and Y. So we do kind of want to there will be some separation between what can be enjoyed in X and Y, what can be enjoyed in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. So we kind of want to have this separation a little bit.
Okay.
So we don't really plan to put out any kind of patch or anything to update X and Y. So we don't really plan to put out any kind of patch or anything to update X and Y. So we don't really plan to put out any kind of patch or anything to update X and Y.